Alrighty, so most of you know, but my name is John Castle. Started Multifamily Roadmap in order to help people get started investing in multifamily real estate in order to get their time freedom and obtain financial freedom through the investing. So this is just a lunch and learn, trying to help people learn, help them get started. And for this one, it's the focus of this one. We're going to be eliminating your living expenses through multifamily house hacking, and I'll explain what that is here. So let's dive in. All right. So what is multifamily house hacking? It's essentially when you buy a small multifamily, let's say 2 to 4 units, and then you live in one of them. So you would live in most likely you'd live in the worst unit, and then you could just basically kind of slowly, get that up to par as you're living there, and while the other ones are rented out to other tenants. You usually want to do a value add component. So, find one that has that vacant unit that you can take over, or find one that needs some renovations. So that way you can slowly do that on your time frame as you're living in it, while the other 2 or 3 units, depending on how big of a property you get, are covering a lot of your monthly expenses through rent. So basically, like I said, you would renovate that unit slowly, paint, hire out the things that you can't do, but fix the things you can as you're just living there on your own time, no sort of rush. And the big benefit of this is you can buy, if you're living in one of the units, you can get in with only 3 or 3.5% down, depending if you go with a FHA loan, or just a conventional loan, you can get 3%. The FHA usually will have a little more restrictions as far as the property goes, just needs to be in slightly better condition. But they also accept a slightly lower credit score. So either way, you can get 3 to 3.5% down as long as you're living in the property, which is about as cheap as you can get into a property unless you do some creative financing. So what are some of the benefits of the multifamily house hacking? I already kind of mentioned this, but you get into a property at 3 to 3.5% down. So that would just be like 3% of the purchase price. For like the properties that I invest in now, since I'm not living in any of them, typically it's 20 to 25% down. So that's a significant chunk of money that you need to get into the property that you kind of eliminate by doing the house hacking. And it's just a great way to get started if you don't have, a bunch of kids, like maybe a bunch of dogs, a bunch of stuff like that you don't really want to live in like a 2 bedroom apartment. So another benefit, you get to kind of overbid the competition because of most of the competition that you'll be going against will be buying them like me. So they'll need more money down. They'll generally need a slightly better price on it to get a good return on their money. Whereas you're only putting a little bit of money into it. You can kind of outbid them, and that way you're not competing as hard with a bunch of other investors. Like I said, you can renovate the units that you need to on your own time. If there's more than one that need renovated, you can always move into one, renovate it, place a tenant into that, and then move into the other one that needs renovated. So it kind of slows down your timeline. There's not as much pressure to get them done and renovated. And if you do it right, you can eliminate 100% of your living expenses. And by living expenses, just mean rent or mortgage payment, depending on where you're at now. And then just, your normal utility costs that you would have with a rent payment or with a mortgage payment, electric, water, sewer, all that kind of stuff. And then the best part, it speeds up saving for your next deal. So if you do want to keep investing, all this money that you're saving in living expenses allows you to build up money in a bank, and then you can just use that to purchase another property down the road, because your expenses will be significantly lower per month than what most other people will be. So we'll run through a property here, just to kind of give you the general details of how it works and how easy the math is on it. But this is actually a property that we purchased, my brother and I, and we didn't house hack it. But if you would house hack it, this is kind of how it would look. It was up in Middletown, PA. We got a picture there of one of the kitchens, and then a picture of the back of the property there. It's a 3-unit building. So if you were going to house hack this, let's say one of the units was vacant and needs updates, and then the other 2 are occupied. 2-bedroom units, both rent for $850 a piece. It's in a C-class area, which is generally just like a working class area. It's not not rough area where there's a lot of crime or anything, but it's not also the best school district around, and a little bit lower income, but you can still get the appreciation through value add in an area like this. Whereas if it's a D class, which is the lower class where it's bad school district, high crime, you usually can't get any sort of value add out of it if you're putting money in to increase the rents or renovate the units. So like I said, it's in a decent school district. And then for this example, we're going to do a purchase price of $150,000, which is about normal for this area. I know depending on where you're at, Bree, you might be in other areas where that seems a
We'll be
little off
looking at
price
about
wise.
500,000.
Yeah, yeah. So it's always
a trailer here.
Yeah. So depending on where you're at, a lot of times you can still find properties that cash flow and are at decent prices, as long as you're just kind of a little bit outside the main city. In the main hubs, like in Austin or even like a Philly, you're going to pay a ton of money just for being in the city like that. So let's break down the numbers. Let me bring up. All right, can you guys see a whiteboard now, as opposed to the PowerPoint?
Yep.
All right. So we'll run through these numbers real quick for you. Make it easy, show you it's pretty easy math, even for someone that's not, doesn't do math for a living. So we got $150,000 purchase price. And I apologize ahead of time for my chicken scratch. My handwriting is not that great. So you get a 97% loan here. So that's the 3% down. So the rest would be for a loan. So 97%. So you get a loan for $145,500. So then that 3% down would cost you $4,500. You figure for closing costs, you're probably about 4%. So that's going to be like title, insurance, recording the deed, all that kind of stuff just to get it closed. So you just figure in another $6,000. And these percentages here are a percentage of the purchase price, if you're wondering where I calculate that. So you're looking at $10,500 to get into the property. So let's start off with income. So basically for the rental properties, you just need, it basically goes, you got your income numbers. So that's mainly rent. And then if you have garages, storage, other stuff like that, that would be in there. You minus the expenses off. That gives you your net operating income. And then you just take the mortgage off of that. And if there's still money left over, that's the property. That means the property cash flows. But it's general income minus expenses is how you calculate for a rental property. It's pretty easy. So let's run through the income. Apartment 1, like I said, they're both, let's just say they're both at $850. So that gives you a monthly income of $1,700. If you annualize that, you're looking at, all right, did the math, $20,400. Now, one thing that goes into the income that you'll want to keep track of is a vacancy rate. So basically, this is just a common rate for the area of how often it'll be one of the units will be vacant. So tenant moves out, and then you got time before you place that next tenant. For this purpose, we'll use 8%, and that's 8% of the income. Usually, where I invest, it's 8 to 10% is a good factor to use. We'll use a little bit lower and use 8 just because you'll be occupying the one unit. So that's one unit that's always going to be filled. That's basically you minus 8% of the income you collected, which is the $20,400, and that's $1,632. And then, so that gives you a gross income of $18,768. So that's your income. Now, next step, dig into the expenses. So the big ones usually always the taxes. So for this area, it was $4,200. That's county and school, and you can find that on the tax. Usually, you should be able to find that on the local tax website just to verify that number. But if you're buying a property, they'll usually give that to you, so that's pretty easy. Insurance, that was $800 for this property. Property management, So for all these properties, I recommend just doing property management, because otherwise you're gonna, you don't want to be living there with another tenant and collecting rent from them, enforcing everything. It's best to just have a property management company, and then they just basically, the other tenants basically think you're just another tenant in there, so they won't bother you for anything specific. Um, and a common number for the area, they usually charge 10% of the rent they collected. So we would take 10% of that 18,000 gross income. So that would be a cost of 1876.80. Sorry for that writing there. And then two big things that people often don't include in expenses are maintenance and CapEx. And CapEx is basically your big ticket items. So you're putting away money each month for when you need a roof, the heater, central air, stuff like that. Maybe a parking lot. So you want to budget a certain amount each month for that. And then obviously, of course, you're going to have maintenance on the units. So for maintenance, I usually use a factor of 500 to 800 per unit, depending on the condition of the property. So we'll just do 500 per unit, which would be 1,500. For CapEx, I usually use anywhere from 200 to 400 per unit, which would be 750. So 250 times 3, since there's 3 units there, gives us 750. Contract services. So that's just lawn and snow, shoveling, mowing the grass, stuff like that. For this property, it generally runs around $350 a month or a year. And then lastly, just any miscellaneous expenses. For this property, it's $100. That's just a fee for borough fee for having a rental property. They charge you. So those are the main expenses. The only other expenses that you incur, obviously, are any utility costs that the tenant doesn't cover. So for this property, electric, the other tenants would cover electric for you. That's typically the case. So any like heating and electric is usually covered by the tenants. But since you're living in the one unit, I figured a $500 yearly electric cost for your unit. Water, it runs for this property at $1,200. Now that's everyone's water because you cover that. Sewer, $750 a year, and then the last one, trash, and that is about $500 a year for this property. So your total expenses then come in at 12. If I did the math right, 12, 526 to 80. So like I said, you basically take the gross income, which is the 18,000 minus the 12, and that gives you your net operating income, which is also known as an NOI. So that's your income before any sort of mortgage on it. So that comes out to 6241.20. And then I estimated a mortgage for this property. And since you get the 97% loan, so only 3% down, and you can get a 30-year fixed rate, I estimated 6% for this property as the interest rate. And then so that gives you a yearly payment of negative 10,570.42. So you bring in 6,241 before mortgage, and then after the mortgage, you got to pay 10,000 plus in mortgage. So you're looking like you're going to negative cash flow 4,329.22. So that's your cash flow. That's basically your after all expenses are paid, what you got to pay in a year into the property. Now, if you were just doing a normal investment, negative cash flow is not good, not good to say the least. So you'd want to avoid that at all costs. But since you're doing a house hack, you're not incorporating the other rent that you're currently living at, which would actually put that into a positive number. So the negative 4,000 just becomes basically your living expenses for the year. So let's say, for example, that your current rent prior to investing in this property is $1,000 a month, and your utilities are $300. So that gives you $1,300 a month times 12 gives you a yearly living cost of $15,600. So that's what your living cost was prior to investing in this deal. But since you house hack this deal, your current living cost is only the $4,000 that you got to pay out in negative cash flow. So the difference in that, if you minus the 4,329, you are saving 11,270.78. So basically, you'd be saving by buying this and living in this deal, you'd be saving $11,000 a year in living expenses. You went from 15,000 down to 4,000. So you'd be able to basically add, it would be like adding $11,000 to your income every year, because you don't eliminate that out of your expenses. And granted, that's also tax-free money. But another benefit of that, so you basically eliminate 11,000 of your living costs that you can put in the bank now that you couldn't put in before to save for another property each year. Now, if in a year from now you decide, hey, I want to actually move into a house, I don't want to live in this 2-bedroom anymore, you rent that other unit out at $850. So now you got 3 rents of $850. If you take that negative 4,329 cash flow number, add 12 months of $850, you would actually, once you move out, then you would have a positive cash flow after you move out of almost $6,000 a year, $5,870 a year in cash flow, that would add to your income each year if you moved out, say you wanted to move into a house, you finally got the family, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what the general numbers look like for a house hack, and what you'd be looking at. Let's see. Let's go back to the slides. All right. So how do you get started in finding these properties and starting investing? You got to first find an investable area. So one that you probably know well is either an area you used to live in, or an area that's close to you now that is better for investing, like somewhere outside of Philly instead of in Philly, for example. And it's just got to be a property that normally, if you weren't house hacking it, it would cash flow, because that saves your butt down the road if something happens to the value of the house. As long as it's producing income each month, you won't have to obviously get rid of the property. You got to understand the key terms. I got some stuff on the website for the key investing terms if you need it. A lot of articles on there. You got to start networking with other investors just to help, learn the deal, help learn the terms, and maybe even find deals from other investors. But they'll be networking with other investors at like a meetup or something like that. It'll give you good contacts for someone to do the contracting work, to do any sort of, if you need a lawyer, accountant, anything like that, you'll be able to find good ones at the meetups from other investors. And then you just got to start getting a deal flow going. So that's the marketing side of things. I do have a course if you need it, but that's, marketing to properties, doing direct mail, cold calling, just to find that good deal. Now, if you're house hacking, you might be able to find one easier on the MLS, which is just the regular listing, because you can kind of pay a little bit higher than you would if you were just investing in the property and not living there. But you got to get your deal flow going so you can start to find properties, start to find good ones that roll in, get landlords that are looking to offload their properties, and get them when they're desperate. So, and then the other thing you got to do is be able to spot deals. So I ran through the analysis there, but I got more of a deep dive on the website as well. You just got to make sure that you're including all the expenses, your normal ones, but then also including vacancy, maintenance, CapEx, stuff like that, to make sure your numbers are correct and you're not, missing a whole bunch and going to buy a crappy deal that looked like a good deal on paper. So you got to know your analysis, which is most of the stuff I put on the website because I have a financial background. So got lots of stuff on there for you to help out. And then just go ahead and house hack your first deal, get started, eliminate a big chunk of your living expenses, if not all of them, if you find a great deal, and then just start saving up for more deals. So just wanted to thank you. That's about it for the lunch and learn. So thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and joining me. Is there any questions? that those numbers confusing, or do you have a question about any of the numbers? Anybody?
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
One is, so obviously my situation in Austin is a lot more expensive than York.
Yeah.
So how, I think I asked you this once before, but like in a place where I've never rented before, or like they may have a tenant or whatever right now, do I just show what the tenant has already been paying if, let's say it's a duplex or whatever, and
Hmm.
use that as like more income to get approved for that higher amount because it's going to be between five and $600,000?
Yeah, like so, like if it's a duplex, I assume you're saying like you would move into one, and then the
Yeah,
other. Is there a tenant in the other one in this scenario?
99% of the time, yes, in
Okay.
Austin.
Yeah. So
Because
basically, you would just, if there's no one in it in the unit that you're moving into now, um, you would just estimate what basically like, hey, if the other unit's pulling in 1,500, you would just, for your numbers to give to the bank, you would estimate
probably average.
1,500 on your side as well.
Okay.
Um, or if there's a tenant already in there that you're basically kicking out, you just use their old rent numbers.
Okay. Because I think that's the part that scares me the most is that I won't be approved for enough, but the rent is super high here in Austin too. So I guess I just need to know when I'm ready. I'll probably ask you how I can put that together to make
Yeah.
it.
Yep. Willing to help there.
And
Yeah,
what's the other
usually,
benefit? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, usually in those higher priced areas, you should theoretically get a lot more rent. Some areas you just are so overpriced that you can't even get. You'd have to have a ridiculous rent for it to make sense at all. Um, but like I said, if you're, even if it, the rent numbers look kind of crappy, if you're eliminating half of your living expenses, it's still a big benefit to you. If you can eliminate $5,000, $10,000 a year in your living expenses, from what you're paying now to if you move into a duplex, it's still, big benefit to you.
Yeah, the numbers work out great. It would be half of what I'm paying for an apartment right now.
Yep.
So that's
Yep. So
not
you'd
fair.
basically be able to stock the rest away and for
Yeah.
whatever else you want to do, or just, you know, your case, maybe travel and whatnot.
What's the benefit of having a management company? I understand obviously them not bothering you, but what about like, or is there any like protection if the renter wouldn't pay, or do they handle that? Like, what's the other benefit of going through a management company?
Yeah, they basically get like I obviously have a busy family schedule. So I don't want to get calls for toilets at, weird hours of nights, or trying to
Yeah.
figure out who can go out there to do the maintenance. So they'll handle the making sure all the maintenance and stuff is taken care of. Generally for that, you can set up a price amount like, hey, if it's something under $200, you don't have to contact me. If it's something over $200, can you just send me an email, and then you basically just approve it. But they handle getting the people out there. They'll handle placing the tenants. They'll handle collecting the rent, and doing all the evictions if someone's not paying rent.
Okay.
So they basically handle all that kind of. They take that all off your plate. So all you're doing kind of is keeping the accounting for it essentially. Because they'll, the property management companies we have, they just ACH us or transfer us the funds each month that are, if we brought in $2,000 in income, 1,000 went out in expenses, we get a deposit of $1,000 into our bank account. And
Okay.
they'll also pay, like our management company, we have the utility bills that we pay on our end going to them, and they actually just pay them out of our account. So it's one less, I'm not paying a bunch of electric bills or a bunch of sewer bills. They take care of that as well. Generally, the only bills I pay on my end are for the taxes, and then the insurance. Taxes,
Okay.
insurance, and mortgage. They handle basically all the other ones.
And how did you go about finding a management company?
I did through word of mouth, for some of my first ones. And so that would be a good way of, if you meet up with other investors in your area, or even if you just biggerpockets.com, you could probably find, is like a social media for it. You could probably find somebody, in Austin or wherever you're at, that has a couple rental properties, and they'll generally know, hey, stay away from this one.
Okay.
This one's been good for me. But you can always kind of, if you can't find anybody in there, you can Google the top couple that come up, give them calls, just kind of talk through everything with them, or even meet with them and kind of see. The good thing is if it's not working out, you can usually just switch to another one as long as you don't let them lock you into some, you know, year or 2 year thing. None of the ones that we're in are locked into any sort of amount of time. So we could just give them like a, hey, you guys aren't performing. If you don't get it up to snuff, then in 2 months we're going to switch management companies, type of deal.
Okay.
But
And
yeah,
then,
networking
okay,
with investors to find the good and bad ones of the area is generally the best way to do it.
that's kind of hard here just because it's so many corporations buying things because it's such a cash cow. So
Yeah.
that's why I was asking like where else I could look. So I could look at bigger pockets, and then there are a couple real estate people that I know here, so I could at least talk to some of them.
Yep.
And then what makes that tax-free income that you're getting from the rent? So you don't have to pay any taxes on what
Well,
you're paying
the
for rent.
the way well, there's two sides of that. So you with that house hack example, I think it came out to negative 4,300 is what the property would look like it produced on the year.
Mhm.
So that would be one that basically be 4,300 that gets kind of deducted off your income because it's a loss.
Right.
And the other way I looked at it was you're eliminating living expenses. Which like if you were like at your job, so you're eliminating what was it? 11,000, let's just say 11,000 to make it easy of living expenses by doing the house hack. If you got $11,000 raise at your job, it would actually be only like a $8,000 raise or $7,500 raise because you get $11,000 more, but then they tax a portion of it. Since you're just eliminating expenses, it'd be actually cutting $11,000 off your living expenses would probably be more closer to making $15,000 more at your job as an
Okay.
equivalent. So that's kind of what I
Okay.
meant by, sorry to confuse you, but that's kind of what I meant by the tax implications of it.
Got it. Okay.
But
Those are my questions. Thank you.
all right. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. All righty. Well, thank you guys for joining me. Appreciate it. If you have any questions, you can email me at john@multifamilyroadmap.com. I'll send out the replay for those who get the replay. And for the people that bought the VIP ticket, I'll send you that via email as well. So if you have any questions on any of that stuff, or if you have a problem opening any of the things I send you, just feel free to respond to my email, and I'll get that taken care of for you. All righty. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.